Hamas wants this war to end. That has been their official position since October 7th, not early October 7th, but later that day when they had achieved their goals and killed many Israelis, kidnapped many Israelis, and were no longer able to continue the killing and kidnapping spree. So Hamas wants this war to end. That is what they have been pushing for. The US President Joe Biden, the official position of the United States of America, as determined by its president, is the same as Hamas. This war needs to end. Israel needs to leave the Gaza Strip. And according to the way it is reported, and according to Netanyahu himself, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu does not currently want the war to end. He wants to cause more damage to Hamas, nowhere near as much damage as we think should already have been caused, but more certainly than Hamas and Biden would like. And he wants the hostages released, which of course is also part of the American position. But yeah, he's not he's not as aligned as around this goal of ending the war as Biden and Hamas. And according to some reports that have come out in the past day or so, the US is now considering dealing directly with Hamas and trying to come to some sort of a deal to release American hostages with American citizenship, and leave Israel to its own deal, which of course, the US is still going to push for because they want the war to end. Welcome to the Daily Objective. Yeah, that's what we're gonna try to discuss today. I mean, whenever we talk about the U.S. position, we think, we're shocked by how, they're hiding less and less the fact that they are siding with Hamas, and this is certainly a new stage in that development. Daniel, your thoughts on this?
I mean, so I've recently watched, there's been a sort of like a presentation or a press conference by Netanyahu where he sort of like also had a map. He was, I think the main purpose was to explain basically his stance behind keeping the Philadelphia corridor, basically that Israel should should be in charge in Philadelphia corridor, which is the sort of the border with Egypt, the Gazan border with Egypt. And by the way, I'm not sure if I ever heard Netanyahu speak English, but he actually has really good English. I was very surprised, like you cannot even hear the accent, but that's completely besides the point. But yeah, this decision, so we mentioned the Biden administration is considering this. So basically, they were considering in the past sort of like a bilateral agreement or sort of, just between Hamas and USA, but basically senior officials in the administration were pretty much so opposed to it that it was quickly dropped. But now it seems that more people would be okay with it. This especially comes, after Hamas has murdered the six more hostages more recently. One of them was an American citizen, and there's still, I think, at least three American citizens still being held by Hamas, as well as few of them who are believed to be dead, meaning on top. So I think like three more. So that's why it seems like people or Biden administration as a whole is more open to it. They of course don't say that they will do it or this is the option that's on the table now. They just said that they are open to all options. And I think, I understand that obviously America, first and foremost, should have has an obligation to its own citizens. But again, this and I know it's not on the same level, but imagine if, during the Second World War or something, one of the allied countries would just independently start negotiating with Hitler to basically allow Hitler to exist, just to maybe get some prisoners of wars back. I mean, that would be again uh, completely unthinkable. And yet, the fact that again, it's not even. uh, Yeah, the fact that Hamas surviving the aftermath of October 7th, the fact that Hamas, uh, as the deal exists right now, will be able to basically exist after, if the deal is signed, will basically be allowed to exist after. Again, it goes completely against interest of any, not just Israel or America, of any Western power, or of any uh, you know civilized country that doesn't want designated terrorist organizations to exist. Again, Hamas is not some sort of like, government that has gone rogue. It has been a designated terrorist organization from the start by the US, by the EU itself, and definitely by Israel. So yeah, this comes, I think, as a huge betrayal, especially to Israel, as America's pretty much closest ally. Um, I have a few more things to say, but let me kick it back to you.
Yeah, America should care about its own citizens and their interests, and this is why it should want free countries to fight against terrorism wherever terrorists exist. I mean, America is sending a message to terrorists everywhere. Look, we're pressuring Israel to capitulate to your demands, and as your demands move further and further along, our pressure grows on Israel to catch up quicker with their capitulation, which they are doing. Netanyahu is, make no mistake about it. We talked about Netanyahu's political comeback and how much he has to thank Biden and the Israeli left for that. But he is not the strong leader that these people are blaming him for being. He seems strong when you listen to Biden and to the left, but when you look at his actual choices, no, the only deal should be Hamas's leaders and fighters all get to die, and the Palestinian people get to leave or live under a strong military occupation. That is the deal. That's the deal. And if you don't like that deal, get a time machine and don't start the war to begin with. But yeah, you started the war and now you have to pay for it. And the payment you get is not having to deal with the return of new fighters to fight your next battles. So yeah, it's really amazing. By the way, yeah, to your point about first of all, thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat. To your point about Netanyahu speaking English, I mentioned on this show, I think Netanyahu was the best in Israel's history in several roles, including finance minister, but also foreign minister and UN ambassador. In part because yeah, not only is his English great, but he's eloquent. And if you look at some of the stuff he did, even as a student, there was a debate between him and some Palestinian. So yeah, he can talk. And kind of when you hear him talk, it makes the way he governs even worse because he knows better than what he's doing. And that again goes into this negotiation where he speaks publicly both in Hebrew and in English about the importance of the Philadelphia corridor and not giving it up. Of course, something he is completely correct about. But apparently behind closed doors, he has he's willing to completely leave that area in the second stage of the deal or to really remove most of the soldiers, which is of course a terrible idea that you're going to stay there. It's worse than the idea of leaving completely is the idea of staying there but with minimal forces, which is what, according again to some of these reports, the US is demanding. Because if you stay there with minimal forces, you give the Palestinians, first of all, more Israelis to slaughter. and take hostage, and the image of victory again over over Israel. Look at how the Palestinians have once again defeated Israel, and then they have the Philadelphia Order anyway. So that's it really Netanyahu's whole approach here, I think, is wrong on every level, and yet, it's not wrong enough for Biden to say, you know what, yeah, I'm okay with that. And to the person who said by something like Biden doesn't know where he is or anything like that, look, Biden is the president. If it's not his decisions, he's the figurehead. But when I say Biden, I do mean, yeah, that is the official U.S. position. By the way, also for those of you not my president people, yeah, whoever is president is your president, unfortunately. And it's going to be unfortunate after the election as well, no matter who wins. Daniel.
Yeah, and also I feel like people have almost like a dictatorial view of a US president, that basically this one person is like controlling every single decision the US government does. No, Biden has his cabinet, it's people he chose. He gave him he gave him the roles because they are going to represent his views or what he would want to do in a certain situation. So every single in a sense, every single executive part of the government has been decided by Biden. And in that sense, the actions of the American government, and I mean the executive part, is basically just an extension of him. So again, this sort of like, I just really dislike the way sort of people think about the role of the US president. But, sort of like going back to the deal, again, so I mentioned basically this deal was I okay, I'm back. I don't know, my thing started like leaving. Um uh Sorry. So yeah, so this sort of deal, sort of like a separate deal just between US and Hamas, has sort of been considered in the past. The main reason why it was rejected was, well, there was a lot of opposition even in the in Biden's administration, but also the sort of a big point was the U.S. government didn't really have that much to give to Hamas. Basically, now it seems like they have a list of about 5 people. I'm not sure if we know specifically who are they, but basically 5 people who, in a sense, Hamas would have an interest in basically taking in exchange for. But again, at you have to remember, at the very simplest, these people would be an asset to Hamas. That's the only reason why Hamas would want them back. The fact that they would help Hamas in some way, in a certain way. And again, the fact that, again, this is considered at all. And, even going to more broadly to the fact that this deal is being discussed, the fact that, yeah, Israel and that America wants Israel to basically release, and many in the Israeli society want to release Hamas terrorists, the people who did October 7, or the people who were caught after October 7, or caught during the operations in Gaza. They want those people released. And again, it's such a it's such a short-sighted view of this whole thing. Like, this will be a perpetual conflict if no one is ever willing to actually do that. And I've been listening to Netanyahu while doing the thumbnails for the show, his sort of presentation. And again, I'm really wondering, we've talked about Candace Owens and the fact that she might be, is it even sort of like good to react to her, because she might be actually out of her mind. But I'm wondering, how can Netanyahu like say these things and then do nothing like that? How can a person like hold these two things? How can a person like be so dissociated from the things they do and the things they say? because again, the way he like speaks about it, he said, and I'm gonna be paraphrasing a lot, but he was basically saying, we were ready to get rid of Hamas. We wanted to, that we led four operations either into Gaza or a little bit into Hamas. Three of them I've led. He said, three. He was a prime minister during the three of them, but they were never allowed by the world to basically go full in. And they, in a sense, they had to wait, or basically Israel, in a sense, had to wait until October 7th, until the world would sort of give it a sanction to go fully in. And again, this sort of like, for one, you're leader of a nation. If you are being so controlled by basically the world around you, are you actually a leader? And then again, the fact that, yeah, again, he says now they can go in, but he didn't. He waited. He waited too long to go in, and then again, it's just not being finished. And now there are negotiations, and there have been negotiations. I mean, the first ceasefire was, I think, in November or December. So again, so it's the whole situation is just so disappointing.
Yeah, and to the question, is he a leader? Of course he's not. I mean, if he keeps saying that, no, that is not leadership any more than, if you ask the person at the counter in McDonald's if they want to change the name of Big Mac to, not so Big Mac anymore. Like, no, I can't do that. The leader of, whoever is the CEO can make that final decision. And Netanyahu is acting like he is a person working at the counter in Israel and not the leader of the country, and the leaders are basically the rest of the world and people who want Israel to fail, which is really amazing. And again, what's really amazing is the fact that Israel's closest ally, the United States of America, wants Israel to fail. And I think the one of the issues now with the current leadership is that they want Israel to fail quickly because there's an election in a couple of months. I think, not having a deal will play into Trump's hands. Trump is the deal maker. His name is on the book, The Art of the Deal. So clearly he knows what he's talking about. Of course, I don't necessarily think he does, but yeah, this will be not good for Kamala if there is no deal before the election, considering that is what they're pushing for, and so they're going to keep pushing Israel harder and harder. And Hamas knows this, and Hamas plays into this, just like Hamas played into internal political turmoil in Israel by murdering hostages and then having Israelis go out to the streets and basically march in support of Hamas. And there is no other way around it. I know we annoyed some people when we said that in an episode a few days ago. I completely stand by that. You might not intend it that way, but that is absolutely what you were doing. And that is absolutely what Biden and the Biden administration is doing when they're pressuring Israel to concede more towards Hamas. One of the reports that is in Israeli, I think the biggest news website today, is that the compromise will be that the IDF will withdraw from parts of the Philadelphia corridor to the west of the Rafah crossing. And yeah, so okay, look, okay, there's a border with Egypt where stuff that's bad for Israelis gets smuggled through. So we have to be there to make sure that stuff doesn't get through. But you know what? We'll just be in some of the border. Yeah, great. I'm pretty sure they have ways around that border, even with the IDF's presence around or underneath. Yeah, the IDF being in some of that border is not going to be effective and is a victory for Hamas. So Hamas might negotiate against that still just because they know Biden is on their side, but that in and of itself is going to be a victory for Hamas. No, if Netanyahu believes what he says, which was right, what he said in that press conference about the Philadelphia corridor, then He will not relent on that. And yeah, by the way, back to another point I sometimes make. I've suggested that there should be a class action lawsuit against Netanyahu by people who bought his book, demanding a refund, because he explains how terrorism should be fought, and he does exactly the opposite. And a compromise I would agree to, settling out of court on that case, is Netanyahu rereading his own books and then acting in accordance with what he wrote in them.
Well, to be fair to him, he didn't read them in the first place, so I think that's also plays a role there. Um, so I want to talk a little bit more about. I think someone in the chat was saying that basically, in a sense, Netanyahu has to play by the international rules. Something you have to realize: international sort of like countries are pretty useless. Like they never do anything about anything that any country does. Like again, uh, whenever there is, again, China continues to do their atrocities when it comes to Uyghurs. Again, I've never seen like this sort of like international, sort of resolutions like coming down and sort of like completely crushing a nation or something like that. Especially if the nation is a nation like Israel, which is Western, which is strong, and which at least should have the moral um, the moral high ground in the right sense, in the fact that it's Western, it's much more individual protecting than any other nation in the region. And yeah, again, if Israel is again, and well, sort of like a bigger point for these people who are saying basically Israel has to play by the sort of international rules. Well, now you have basically a choice. You have a choice between a certain destruction, which is going to happen if you allow Hezbollah, Hamas, the PLO, Iran, and the Houthis in Yemen, and many other of these groups. If you allow them to exist, if they are never going to get destroyed, if you allow them to attack you, eventually they'll succeed. That's a given. Eventually, if you don't defend yourself, if you refuse to fully defend yourself, meaning actually getting rid of the source rather than sort of just treating the symptom, this sort of like cancer will eventually overwhelm you. And if the choice is between that and basically standing up to sort of like international whatever people wagging a finger at you, you have a choice, and either you can decide now or someone else will make the decision for you. And again, it might be, I'm not saying it's going to be in a sense an easy decision. Again, going against the crowd takes a certain amount of courage, and in this case it means going in a sense against sort of like the international community. It takes its toll, but you have a choice to make, and you will have to make it.
Yeah, Jesse says, I'm not sure in reference to what, but he says 100% Dan, but the Security Council, the sitting 6 or 8, I forget, make a difference. So first of all, Security Council is 15, there's 5 permanent members, and yes, they make a difference there, but look, Israel can't put, again, it can't put diplomatic relations, even when it comes to risking sanctions. It can't put that above the lives of its citizens. Now, again, this is 11 months too late, because what should have been done is October 7th in the evening, Gaza should have been, turned into rubble. And then there would have been a month where, or however long, a few weeks, where there would be protests and there would be Security Council resolutions, and the US probably wouldn't veto 1 or 2 of them, and so on and so forth. But Israeli citizens will have been more secure, and Israeli soldiers, way, way fewer of them, way fewer than the number who has died in Gaza would have died. I think a ground operation would still have been necessary because of the tunnels. But yeah, that's what should have been done, and it would have been the right thing to do militarily. It would have been the right thing to do in terms of, world opinion, the international community, all that bullshit, because again, that was the moment when, you could have called out people on their pretense, standing with Israel, stuff, and said, well, look, if you stand with Israel, why are you standing with Israel? Because Jews died, or because you think it is wrong to slaughter Jews, and the goal of a second Holocaust is an evil one. And if you think it's an evil one, then you will say the action that we just took immediately after their attack to prevent it was necessarily good. And in part, I read Jesse's comment because of Jesse's earlier comment, Biden's Montreal screw job. Yeah, you and I might be the only people who get that wrestling reference, but any wrestling reference will probably be read from the chat. Uh, that is my abuse of power here. Wrestling references go to the front of the line. Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, to sort of summarize this, any sort of deal with the terrorist organization, again, is just going to empower the terrorist organization. And, there's understandable, because also I've heard that families have sort of been appealing to the Biden administration, because as I said, uh, Hamas is still holding American citizens. So, the feelings that the families have are absolutely understandable. Uh, but again, the government should be about protecting individual rights. Uh, it should be about the long term. It shouldn't be about, ideally it should, in a sense be devoid of any sort of acting on feelings of some people, and should be objective about what its proper role is. Um, and in this sense, the proper role should be the destruction of Hamas. So again, this doesn't happen again. There are many Americans in Israel. So you have to realize also that if America wants to protect, wants to make sure the American citizens in Israel are protected, either it has to basically give up on them and say, we cannot protect you, or do something about their protection, which would include, at the very least, the destruction of Hamas. But ideally, we would realize we have been at war with Iran for 50 or so years, and basically finally do something about the existence of Iran and its funding of many of the either explicit terrorist organization or many militias all around the Middle East.
All right, we are out of time. I will just say to Leo's question, is WWE legit wrestling, for comments making yes, WWE, AEW, whatever promotion, less of the Japanese stuff because I don't follow it that closely. But actually, the Montreal screw job reference is not really correct, because that was done kind of, behind Bret Hart's back, whereas this is done in Netanyahu's face and in the face of the Israeli and American people. Biden is openly siding with Hamas. And yeah, this is something that again, Israelis should take note of, but Americans should take note of when they consider what they want to do in November. We should also maybe think a bit more critically about what we want to do before we decide to do an hour-long show about Bassem Youssef, but we didn't, so we are doing an hour-long show about Bassem Youssef. We're going to be talking about his appearance on Piers Morgan. I mean, we want to show who this person is, but he shows who he is within the first few seconds. When I started rewatching it today, I realized I remembered seeing this when it aired on October 17th of last year, and I couldn't make it through more than a few seconds. We will try to make it through some of it. Thanks, Daniel, for deleting that. I just saw it in the corner of my eye, and yeah, not all comments get retained here in the chat. All right, the reality show is starting in a couple of minutes. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks everybody for joining. We'll see you there.